Could I then thank in particular Russell, Andrew, Mark, Ivana, Mike and Hildy for their contributions today. It is a real gift for us for people to come along and talk about things that are important to the industry the way that they have. So thank you. And could I thank Hazel for hosting and those people who've wandered around with the microphones and they're actually putting enormous amount of work into booking and arranging this conference. I think it's a fantastic venue. I hope that you come back again, and I hope that you may find ways of using it for your own organisations. What did I think were the themes? I think the first thing I have to pick out is the importance of training. I think virtually everybody today has spoken about the importance of training, and I take Mike's point at the end that it has to be relevant to what's going on, because the other thing that people talked about is that the training that you need needs to be relevant to the organisation that you're working in and to the place that you're working at. We can't ever do that. The regulator can only set base levels. It illustrates how important it is for the providers and users of security to reinforce that training for the people who are working, and how unacceptable it is to assume that you don't need to do that. Everybody talks about partnership and the importance of partnership, and I think really good examples from virtually all of the speakers about how partnership can work, and I thought some strikingly honest contributions on how partnership needs to be better in elements in parts of Tesco, and I thought that was a really honest assessment of how things might need to work forward and need to change. What was music to my ears was the importance of the effectiveness of supervision in this industry, because I think one of the other things that goes straight away when you try to take cost out is that first line of supervision. Most of the first session speakers talked about how important that supervision is locally, how things don't work if it's not operating, and I think that's a really important part of the quality regime. We lose it at our peril. We talked about communication between staff and their employers, between those who contract in and the staff, and between the three parties, the provider, the buyer and the individual who's doing the work. And I'll just pause there because a number of occasions we mentioned individuals. As you know, our prime responsibility is to license individuals. We've got about 330,000 active individuals in the industry. And we can't forget that it's really important that you are communicating with those people if we're going to make the industry effective and successful. I particularly enjoyed the conversation and James's intervention about buyer be aware and how it's all the buyer's fault that you don't understand what a great service is provided. And I think Russell's comment that it's the industry's responsibility to make that clearer to people is bang on. I'll come back to that briefly in a moment. But I also thought that Hildy's pointed out that there is actually a very detailed website that might help people. It's worth bearing in mind and use it, check it out. Ruth touched on violence at the beginning, and I'm quite appalled by what our survey showed, and I know work like Leicester University and on the Work in the Doors chat pages has emphasised that door supervisors and people in the guarding industry suffer an intolerable level of violence. It's about 6 or 7%, I think, in the NHS, and that's considered to be a national scandal. You can't walk onto London Transport without seeing a sign saying that if you frown at their staff, this will be unacceptable. It's something that as an industry we have to work on, partly because it goes unreported. It's in local newspapers, but when I asked about what reports were there of serious violence to door supervisors, what reports were there of deaths of door supervisors in the course of their business, we have no numbers on that. And that was in the context of when we were launching the new physical intervention training, and we had a reasonable idea of how many punters had been hurt, but not really about the door supervisors. But we did make sure that those statistics were played out, and you will have heard them in the news media reports. It's something that I think Ruth and I feel is important, and we will be returning to over the course of the year.